Okay, welcome everyone to the NHS Direct January board meeting. For those of you watching online, if you could complete the online feedback, that would be really helpful. It's clearly my first meeting as acting chair and Roger's as chief executive. So welcome everyone. I don't think we have any apologies for absence. Everybody's here. Great. Declarations of interest, any? No? Okay. So, minutes of the meeting, the last meeting. Anybody got any factual inaccuracies, comments?
Good to know.
Okay,
Good.
okay, so we can approve those. Excellent. Matters arising, Roger.
So we've got the discussion we had at the last meeting about what the role of the closure board and what the relationship between the closure board and this board was, and as a way of resolving that discussion, we've included with the papers for today the terms of reference of the closure board, which I think sets out what its relationship with us is quite clearly. I don't know if there are any questions about the terms of reference. No. Okay, so that's fulfilled that action. The next is one for Jackie, which I think is on the corporate scorecard as well. So we'll deal with that later on. So those are the two actions that were still open from last time.
Good. Your report, Roger.
Okay, so there's just three issues really in the Chief Exec's report. The first was that I just wanted to confirm to colleagues some changes in the executive team. As was announced in December, Ruth Rankin is seconded full-time to the TDA as their programme director for this closure, which of course is a very useful position for us to have Ruth in, and that's going very well. Kat is doing her hours with NHS Direct, which are 15. She's doing with HSCIC, although she's agreed as medical director to attend our board meetings, so thanks, Kat. And Trish is doing 2 days a week with the TDA in the Northwest as a way of finding out how the TDA up there works and whether there might be opportunities for her in the future as well. So I just wanted to assure colleagues as well that with those secondments, we are still able to run the trust, and we're still quorum for all our meetings, and we've been doing this for a month now, and it is going absolutely fine. So I just wanted to assure colleagues of that. The second item is the fact that we've now had 4 meetings of the NHS Direct Closure Board. It was convened near the beginning of December, and whilst we'll come on to talk about some of the specific items that the Closure Board is grappling with, by and large it's working very well. It's accepted all of the reports that we've put into it, and we're working well with the board to develop our plans for closure, decommissioning, transfer and dissolution. And then finally, at the beginning of January when we came back, we had to move fairly swiftly to get our transfer projects in place and our closure and decommissioning plans in place following the end of the staff consultation, which of course wasn't until the middle of December. And so we got our senior managers together swiftly after the beginning of the new year, brought them up to date with all the plans that we've got, and also took the opportunity to do a couple of colleague support exercises, as symbolic as anything else really, to make sure that they were engaging with this stuff now, because for some of the senior managers there was an expectation that they were going to transfer to other organisations, and now they're not, and it's the same for quite a lot of the staff that work for them as well. So we really wanted to engage them in the activity, both for their own good, but also so that they would make sure that their staff were doing the same. And that seems to have worked, and I'll update in a bit more detail on that later. Just one more item, verbal item from me, and that is that we've had a message from Nick in the last week just to thank the board for the send-off he got in December and for his presence. He was very grateful for that. He had a very good evening, as I think most of us did, and he wishes us luck for the rest of our time in existence. Good. Thank you, Chair. Are there any questions on any of that?
I should know the number maybe. How many senior and middle managers have we got?
Well, we've still got about 60 actually.
60.
Tim. Yes. It's. I would have thought by now that but quite a lot of the corporate functions have remained, of course, and things like research, which has 2 or 3 senior managers in it, still exists. So we are a little bit top heavy.
Yeah.
For these last few months, to be honest.
Yeah, that's quite a population to do the best for, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, Matt, just wondered. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Roger. Corporate performance, Jackie. Yep, so as we agreed last time, we've just got the one sheet for the performance and scorecard going forward. Just like to bring your attention to one error on the summary sheet, which says that we failed Tal answered in 60 seconds. Actually, it was Tal answered in 30 seconds. Sorry, we failed, not 60 seconds. I don't think there's anything particularly to note on the report. Volumes continue to be fairly low, and we are performing to the standard we'd expect to perform on all of those calls. The only thing that we did discuss this at Finance Committee last week, and the only thing we agreed to change really was on the financial element right at the bottom, the variance against plan. We've actually got 21% underspend against plan, and it's showing as amber here because, you know, amber because you're really underspending your budget, but I think the consensus was that really it's green because we're doing well by underspending against the budget, and we've been a bit hard on ourselves by calling it amber.
You said
it. The only other clue that we had at Finance Committee again was on the dental nurse assessment, where I sort of asked the question. We've got 4% of patients going to urgent and emergency care and 35% to self-care and routine, whereas the rest of them are going. I've now got that information, and most of them, the rest is same-day referrals, either to dentists or GPs on the same day. Okay. That is the arbitrage. Nothing else unless anybody has any questions. Okay. Obviously, it's a slightly new format, so any questions on content or format?
We talked about it. I think this is good. This is fit for purpose for the findings of.
Yeah. Just out of interest, I did get hold of the 111 information for the weekend in the 29th of December, and just for the answered in 60 target, nearly all of the providers met that target.
Okay.
Certainly all of the ones that were previously
We're
in
interested.
Good.
That is good.
Can I just mention the 0845 contingency service that we're coming to an end at the end of on the 28th of February. So when we meet again, it will be in its last week. We are only, apart from some sort of waifs and stray calls, we are only servicing 3 areas: Cambridge and Peterborough, Cornwall and the Scilly Isles, and Luton and Bedfordshire. We have had a delay actually. The Cambridge and Peterborough service was supposed to transfer last week and is now transferring this week, but commissioners are very clear that we can't remain beyond the 28th of February, so I don't think that the other 2 services that are going to transfer on the 6th and 12th of February are going to be in jeopardy at all. So I just wanted to share that with colleagues, because it will nearly be over the next time we meet.
Okay, finance report. Yeah. So again, the finance report is slightly shorter than it normally is, but still reporting on the same issues. We have a year-to-date deficit, operation deficit of 15.5 million. So we're still on track for the operational forecast of 21 million. One of the things that is missing from this report is in terms of the number for the closure costs. And I think in the private part of the board we will be discussing some of those. The reason that they've not been reported yet is that they are still very much need to be refined. So we still have a maximum cost of closure of around about £23 million, but we are expecting it to be lower, but we are still waiting for a number of decisions to be made, and I'll go through that detail in the next slide. Okay. Got nothing else really to add, because we sort of are on track with the operational side. Any questions?
Shall I just make the point, if we're looking at cash, if you're keen students of this chart, which is Appendix 5, you'll see that payroll is 1.2 million, and that after week 5 we have a bank balance of 600,000. I think we can say that the Finance Committee kicked the tyres around that issue, and we are confident that we've got sufficient cash to pay the wages next month. So, but you might draw that conclusion if you really get into that chart. But
Jackie, could you just talk us through the process that you go through in order to make sure that the money comes in time from the TGA? To get the cash. The cash, yeah. So we are maintaining daily cash flows at the moment to make sure that we have enough money. So in January we asked for £2 million, which is on the decommissioning line. So if we estimate, so during February we will have similar cash flow. If we are concerned in particular about by week 4 having enough to pay the payroll, then we will make a claim to the TDA, and we have to make the claim a week before we need the cash. So we do that, but we have to demonstrate that we're going to run out of cash in order to be able to secure it. So there's no danger at all of us not being able to.
yeah, although this chart might suggest there may be.
There is no danger, but it is close to the wire, because you can't have the cash until you need it.
That's right, with public funds. So,
and it is very difficult when you're not quite sure when your income is going to come in, which is
really guaranteed.
Any other questions? Fine, thank you. I can feel taking Okay, so we're now moving on to staff consultation and the quality impact assessment. Roger.
Thanks, Chair. The equality impact assessment was part of the work we were doing with the staff consultation, which actually ended on December the 13th. But because some of the decisions that were made about commissioning were only made that week, we weren't able to do the equality impact assessment for the December board. So we're presenting it to this board. It's a requirement under the Equality Act 2010. We've agreed the action plan with our staff side colleagues, and it is really around the process we go through is to see if any of the changes that we are making have a particular impact, a specific impact on groups of employees with protected characteristics. And actually, in the process we're going through at the moment, there are a couple of groups who are going to find it more difficult to access the colleague support than others, and they specifically are some of our home workers. And more specifically than that, we've got a number of home workers who either have caring responsibilities or have disabilities, and that's why they're working at home in the first place. So we are going to focus some specific attention, almost on a sort of casework basis, on some of those colleagues, so that we can try, where possible, to make sure that we can secure employment for them in the future. A lot of people want to continue to work, and they're going to find it very difficult if they can't do things like interviews over the phone and that sort of thing. So we've got a group of colleagues who are going to work very closely with them, so that we can make sure that first of all they get the same access to the colleague support services that we've got as everybody else, but also to do a bit more work with them to try to put them together with potential employers to see if we can get them into jobs.
Good, that's reassuring.
Cheers. Questions? Steve?
Yeah, I mean, what sort of resource do you have to be able to do this effectively?
Well, we've trained about 12 colleague support people who have come from a variety of different parts of the organisation, and where their work has come to an end, they're specifically doing this work. So we have the resource, actually. We have people who can do this. Yeah.
And then my question was, is there sort of best practice in this area? I mean, how do the people doing it know what's the most effective, thing to do? I mean, because support is a good
Yeah.
thing, but there's something about can people really access employers?
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
we've got partners here. We've got our partnership with 1080, who are still working with us, and so they're the people who have trained our colleague support people, and so they'll be working with them to make sure that the sort of things we offer are realistic and helpful, and also can get access to people like Job Centre Plus, who can be particularly helpful in this area. So we've got good advice from outside the organisation to ensure that we can give as good practice as we can the problem we've got is time, really, because these people, our home workers, only discovered that they weren't going to have a job in December, so we've had to respond pretty quickly to that new set of circumstances for them, because they thought they were going to transfer to another provider. So it's not, our biggest challenge is the fact that there's now only 9-10 weeks to go.
And sorry, just one other question. So within this sort of support, is there sort of expertise in knowing what employers might fit them, or whether there are any schemes, or there's actual sort of, as well as I suppose there's pragmatic sort of stuff.
Our guys will be doing the research for that. They'll be making so some of Trish's team are making contact with organisations who employ clinicians at home.
Brilliant.
So people like Bupa and a number of charities these days have health lines,
great, thank you.
Remote healthcare of a variety. It's a growing kind of industry. So we hope, we can't guarantee, but we hope that we at least can match our employees who are at risk with potential employers. Ultimately, of course, we can only put the parties together, but we'll do everything we can.
Okay. We're specifically asked to approve the action plan. Can I just check where we've got the columns of progress? TBC.
Yeah.
Are we having? Are we going to get some progress?
We'll come back. We'll come back
board
to the next
meeting?
two board meetings.
Next board meeting.
Yeah.
Fine.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fine. Are we content to approve the action
Yeah.
plan?
Yeah.
Yes, I'm very
Fine.
good.
Thank you. Transition and decommission and closure. Roger again.
Sorry, Chair. So we've got the normal transition, decommissioning and closure report, which I won't go through the entire report. It is as detailed as it usually is, and I'll certainly take questions on that. But I will just highlight two or three updates. One is that all employees now know what their destination is, apart from a small group in Newcastle, where North East Ambulance Service is taking on the Care Connect service. They will be using a site near our Newcastle site, but we don't know which one yet. And until we do, we don't know how many or any of our employees will transfer from our Newcastle site to the NIAS site to do Care Connect. We do know that they won't be using the Care Connect sites we use in Wakefield, Nottingham and Bristol, so our employees there know what their fate will be, but there is a small group in Newcastle that don't know that. Apart from that, as long as all the transfers go ahead, and we'll come on to that in the private part of the board, as long as all the transfers go ahead, everybody knows what their destination will be. And all of those people who are going to become redundant have had letters this month to confirm their redundancy date. So that's the first thing. The second thing is we've been running colleague support roadshows in each of the sites over the past 3 weeks. We've done, I think, about 14 in total, and they've been very well received. So they've included some of the activities that we've done with the senior managers around things like preparations for CVs, but we've also had Job Centre Plus come to those so that people know what to do after they're made redundant. And I think as much as anything, that's brought home to people the situation they're in, and so we've had a much bigger uptake over the last few weeks of all the colleague support activity. I think those are the two issues I just wanted to highlight. Other than that, I'll take any questions on the report.
Just at the bottom of page 3, this business about the Exeter lease to Southwest Ambulance. This is an administrative issue, presumably.
Yes, and in fact, Tim, it's our intention, and we've at least got agreement in principle that all of our properties will transfer to NHS Property Services before the end of March, and so in effect, all of the responsibilities for properties go somewhere else.
That's good.
Peter?
Yeah, I didn't know if this was for now or later, but just on the clinical solutions exits, and I just was interested in how that was progressing, really, because it's obviously I've taken an interest in it before, but I assume this was not going to be as simple as some of the other things.
Well, we've started conversations with Capita, now called Capita Healthcare Decisions, rather than Clinical Solutions. So we've opened up dialogue. Jackie and I went to see the chief exec and their commercial director, and sort of really set out what it was we were trying to achieve. I've now had 2 follow-up sessions with them since then, and I think I'm feeling quite confident that we are on the same page with them, that they understand that we need to find a way, firstly to exit from the 2 contracts, but also secondly to retain some elements of IT operational services through to the end of June, or very shortly before that. And I think they're really understanding, what the nature of the activity required is, and I think I feel confident that we're on the same page.
Thank you.
Okay. I guess I just have one question, which is obviously the numbers are quite stark on the back page, 750 people, and obviously a lot of people leaving with redundancy notices up to the very last day, basically. What is morale like in your organisation?
I think it is starting to hit home when people are starting to go to some of the roadshows. Certainly within finance, they went to a roadshow with Keynes last week, and some of them came a bit shell-shocked.
Yeah.
Coming back there because there's a realisation of what's actually happening.
The senior manager meeting we had was very upbeat. These are people, however, who have been involved with this for some years now, really, and so they know. But the middle manager meeting we had a few days later was a lot flatter, a lot less engaged, and a lot more difficult. And I'm visiting 3 Care Connect sites this week, and the sense I get is that because there's continuing uncertainty for some people in Care Connect, that they are pretty fed up with that situation. The other interesting group for me are the home workers, who in the first half of January were just very, very angry. And it started to worry me that they weren't going to move from the angry position, the bottom of the change curve, that they were just going to stay there for the next 3 months, and that they wouldn't therefore do any work on the next stage of their career. There have been signs over the last couple of weeks that they are starting to realise that to be stuck there for the next 2.5 months is not going to do them any good. And I think they've been starting to engage, and with some real help from colleagues around the table and elsewhere, to engage with them really strongly to try to kind of move them on, just to get some help, because of course they only got the news that they weren't going to have a job in the middle of December, and so they're only back involved in this sort of 2 or 3 weeks ago. So, and I think we're just starting to, just by listening really, starting to move colleagues on a bit. So I think it varies in different groups, because they've had very different experiences of what's been happening over the last few months, actually.
The most important thing of all is making sure that everybody gets access to all support and help, and makes the best use of that, isn't it? Yeah. Tricia, did you have anything extra to add?
No, Roger's covered it. It was, it depends where you are and what your role is in the organisation. And there's a core group of staff who are concentrating on still delivering the service. So they are equally still doing the seeking and coming to terms with, they'll be seeking new employment, as well as maintaining, a safe service, the here and now. So depending where you are in the organisation depends where you are on that change curve.
Fine, thank you. Okay.
But performance is still holding up.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
Which is all credit.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Every single member of staff who's on the front line, making sure that we're still providing that.
Yeah, and that's been a very strong message, Sue, that, right from the very beginning when we knew we were in this position, it was we made as a board, and the staff have bought into that statement, we will maintain a clinically safe service until the very last patient is cared for. Yeah. The evidence, and certainly my evidence on the ground, is staff are actually doing exactly that. So credit to them.
Excellent.
Thank you. So let's move into section of governance and compliance. Give Roger a break. Alan.
Thank you very much, Chairman. First of all, as far as the board assurance framework is concerned, I hope all the board members have got the revised version of the spreadsheet that was sent out. I should draw attention actually to the correction that was made, which is right at the bottom of the sheet on page 2, the CD5. The eagle-eyed may have spotted that a score of 12 should show a RAG rating of amber, not green, on the chart, and that was, I think, a printer error, so I apologise for that. Back to a summary of where we are. I have been saying for the last 2 or 3 months that the focus of the assurance framework would shift towards the activities connected with the organisational closure, and that is the case. And certainly, as far as the agenda for today's meeting is concerned, and I'm sure for the future, a lot of the business that we're conducting is focusing on those areas where the assurance framework does indicate the highest residual risks, finance being one area, as I've mentioned before, and I'm sure we'll come on to that later on in the later part of the meeting. There is still income at risk, although I'm glad that Jackie is carrying on her efforts to secure payment of a lot of our income now, which is gradually coming in. And another big issue on finance is ownership of the closure costs, which we believe is coming to an agreement now, but until I think we have that final word, we will still be a bit anxious about it. The other areas worth mentioning are, as far as service transfers are concerned, again we'll be talking about those later, but the board of the one of the providers that's receiving services from the Trust has made conditions about commissioners meeting exit costs in the future in order to avoid financial risk, which is understandable, and there's been some delays in, I think, getting that assurance so far. And generally speaking, I think the timescales pressure of ensuring these transfers are conducted safely before the end of March is an issue that the individual transfer projects are focusing on. And then finally, for me, the issue of dissolution of the Trust as an administrative organisation. We are still awaiting confirmation of who the successor organisation should be. We are finding it's quite a minefield because there are no precedents that appear to have been set in the past that match the experience that we're going through. We thought there are similarities with the PCT and SHA closures, but not similar enough for us to be able to mimic what they're doing. And also there's an outstanding issue that's a cause of some anxiety now about who should own clinical data that we would want to transfer from this organisation on closure. And we had a call earlier, in fact later last week, when we discovered that the PCTs, which closed 12 months ago nearly, the destination for their clinical information has still not been resolved yet. So whereas we were given some reasonable assurance that it would be sorted by the Department of Health, that hasn't been the case thus far for PCTs, which hold very similar information to that which we hold here. So that's an issue that we'll be pursuing with the Departmental Records Office that has agreed on our behalf to pursue that with the Department of Health, but it looks like that might be a trickier issue to resolve than we were first given to understand. And that really, I think, is a summary of the BAF for January.
Okay. Any questions? Yeah.
Presumably this issue with the clinical data being unresolved where it should go to, presumably that could have knock-on effects with any sort of potential sort of medical liability cases or governance issues that crop up after we close.
Yes, I think as far as the cases that are in progress are concerned, the documentation will probably transfer to the litigation authority that resolves these cases on our behalf anyway. But as far as that issue is concerned generally, from what I'm told, the PCT data has been securely stored essentially in an archive provided by a contractor on behalf of the Department of Health, where they have access in order to enable that kind of process to continue. But the actual ownership is the issue that hasn't been resolved yet. So at the moment it's being held in a temporary home until that question is resolved.
Who will resolve that? Department of Health?
Department of Health have to, yeah.
So it's not our problem then? We just
no.
say, right, this is where it is and you need to solve it.
That's exactly the case, and I think that's what we need to be doing, is making sure there is somewhere secure and safe where it can be accessed and stored in the meantime. But the Department of Health isn't allegedly authorised to hold clinical data itself, so that's part of the problem.
I think there's also a timeliness aspect to it, which is we need to know what format that data needs to be in. We need to make sure that there are adequate tools in place to be able to access it. Yeah. And therefore, what we really want to have at this juncture is a dialogue with the people who are going to retain it. We're doing similar activities for other ex-organisations so that we can have a fruitful dialogue to get those issues resolved. And at the moment, we're not able to do that.
Who should you have the dialogue?
Well, the Departmental Records Officer, who we had a meeting with about 2 or 3 weeks ago, is aware of the issue and has agreed to take it away for resolution. However, it was at a subsequent call that we discovered from a Department of Health colleague of his that the PCT issue hasn't been resolved. So whereas we were reasonably assured that it would be a fairly straightforward matter, but ultimately we will escalate it to the Department of Health. It has to be their responsibility.
And we'll push really hard. I mean, we would really want a clean break rather than you do, and we want everything resolved. So we'll push really hard on this because I don't want
yeah.
things to be
That was my
dribbling on.
response,
Yeah,
actually.
don't want to be.
Sounds like we've got to put our foot on the gas.
I think we have at some point. Yeah.
Okay. Anything else? Thank you. Alan, again, annual report and accounts.
Just very briefly, thanks, Chair. This is just for information, particularly for those members of the board that don't attend the audit committee. We've agreed, as part of the process of accelerating work at year end, to leave the residual work of the successor body minimised, that we would produce a final draft version of the annual account and report for consideration by both the audit committee and the board on the revised date of the 24th of March, which I think all board members should now be aware of. And this is just to assure the board that a process is underway to ensure that that happens, and to acknowledge the fact that our external auditors, who have some prior experience of overseeing the accounts of closing organisations, have been very cooperative and helpful for us as far as the accounts side is concerned. So that process is now well underway.
Good. Questions?
Just ask on the accounts what we're thinking about doing in terms of the quality accounts. To what extent this document, as a final document from the trust, might be seen as our legacy?
Yeah. Well, I'll let Trish answer in more detail, but our plan at the moment is that, as far as the annual report is concerned, because of the timescale, we will be essentially complying with the minimum requirements in every respect, not just the quality account, but following the board discussion that we've had at the last meeting and subsequent clinical governance committee, I think your intention, Trish, is to do something more comprehensive than that.
Yeah, that's right. I think the organisation has learned considerably a great deal through its research and its clinical audit and its innovation. So, as we discussed in the clinical governance committee, I want to do a legacy document similar to the quality accounts, which maps out the innovation we've undertook, what we've learned through the audit and the research of those innovations, and have it there as a legacy document which will go in probably into the archives and nowhere else. But my initial intention was to do a beefed up quality accounts which describes that. The steer now is to do a succinct quality account for the annual report, but it's still my intention, along with the rest of the clinical team, to do a look back exercise, so it's therefore legacy.
And the other reassuring fact that's emerged since we last met is that at the meeting with the Departmental Records Office, the chat confirmed that they work very closely with the National Archive, and that they act essentially as a filter. They receive information from organisations and then decide, using the National Archive's own criteria, what they think may be of interest. And we actually raised this as an issue, and he thought there would be great interest in it. So we thought it was more likely to attract the right interest if it was a standalone document than just being buried in an annual report.
Okay, any other questions? No. So since the last board meeting, we've had 3 subcommittees, clinical governance, audit and finance. So we should have some verbal feedback. We start with Tim from the clinical governance committee.
Yeah, a relatively unexciting clinical governance committee, looking particularly
I thought it was riveting. It was high octane stuff.
looking in particular at the confirming the ongoing safety of our dwindling services, but also looking at the legacy in terms of future litigation issues, those cases sitting with the Ombudsman at the moment, of which they're blessedly few, and determining how they will be dealt with by a legacy body, a residual body of some description. Which I think that was to the satisfaction of the committee, and reviewing other achievements, including the improved compliance now with the statutory mandatory training. At last we're ticking all the boxes, which is very nice, albeit at a late stage. I don't think there's anything else which hasn't already been discussed or is more generally on today's agenda.
Questions? Thank you, Tim. Peter, with the Audit Committee.
Yeah, I think everything I would have said has either been said or will be said shortly. I think the only major point I wanted to make, which Alan has alluded to, is that we are working very strongly with the National Audit Office on the end of year accounts, and I think the relationship that we have with them and the conversational piece we had in the Audit Committee was very positive, and therefore, although there are some awkward timing and financial issues perhaps to get round, they are working strongly with us, and I was very pleased with their suggestions and the cooperation, particularly Jackie and colleagues, to get it resolved before the end of the financial year, which is very unusual. So I think there are other points of that going forward a little bit, but we could talk about that.
Okay.
Other than that, you've heard it all already.
Any questions? Peter? No? Great. And then that brings us to the Finance Committee.
Thank
Tim?
you, Sue. Well, thrilling finance committee, as it always is. We looked at performance that we've looked at before, and particularly we talked about the cash issue, which we've already talked about this morning, which is pretty important. We've circulated to you a paper about the year-end forecast outturn, which is just for information really, but we thought it was a good thing for other board members to see it. And we also talked about closure costs, but some of those are quite commercially sensitive, so I'll come back to that in the private session if I may. But otherwise, it was we used all our time as well, so it was quite a good meeting, and I'll compliment Jackie again on the quality of the reporting that we've got. It's really very, very useful, particularly in this difficult time. It's essential. So we're really pleased with what the finance team are doing for us. Any questions?
Good. Okay. Fine. That finishes the governance and compliance section. Which brings us on to stakeholder activity. So trust engagement visits. Roger, I believe you're going to be visiting.
Yes, as I said earlier,
Yeah.
I'm visiting Wakefield, Nottingham and Bristol this week, and intend to visit the rest of the sites in the 2 weeks after that, and then again towards the end of March. Okay. That's my timetable anyway.
Fine. Homeworking. Tricia.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Board members will remember in our seminar in January, at the end of the seminar, some of our staff side representatives who are also home workers described to us some of their frustrations and their experiences they've been having with home working, and gave some recommendations on what we needed to do to improve their lot, both as an employee and in order to support them deliver the right and appropriate care to our patients. This paper describes what the issues were, which were varied, mainly technical, but not all technical, and what measures under Alan and the IT team's leadership to address those issues, of which now the majority of them are overcome and resolved. You've heard from Roger with from the same staff group's experiences now realising they're not going to be transferring to other organisations, but suffice it to say that they are still doing what we ask of them, which is deliver good quality care to our patients. Even when there were issues, they overcome those issues, maintaining patient safety, and the majority are now resolved. I'll take questions if there are any questions.
Yep. Fine. Thank you. And patient experience. We have a recording. Tricia, do you want to introduce it?
Yeah, okay, thank you, Chair. So, as board members remember, we always listen to a recording, and we've had some toing and froing as to which call recording we will have at the board, because with our dwindling workforce and other challenges, it's been difficult to sometimes not actually download the call, but to get consent from the patients for board members to actually listening to those calls. We managed to overcome that, and we've had the one recording for this month's meeting, which is follows the journey of a child and parent who assessed initially their symptoms of vomiting on our online service through our healthy symptom checkers, and through that assessment came to a speak to clinician outcome, which, as board members know, the call drops into our queue, and then one of our nurses actually phoned the parent, the mum of this young child, back and undertook a continued assessment with regards to the vomiting. As the report says, it was deemed to be a very good and appropriate call. I think the nurse demonstrates very clear empathy and engagement with this mum. It perhaps could have been a little shorter, but suffice it to say, she was probably making the most of her time with that patient. And the outcome for the child was self-care. And my position on this was, this could have easily been a parent then that took that child either to an emergency GP appointment or even to an A&E department, because they weren't, the care wasn't concluded. Where with this, using the online symptom checker, then having the supportive advice that the care she was giving her child was right and appropriate, this parent was actually able to stay at home. And so I think evidence is the value that the Speak to Advisor service offers the wider public. Other than that, I shall take
Patricia knows I was very keen to have a
Yeah,
Speak to
you
Advisor
was.
call.
Yeah.
So I'm really pleased that we managed to do it in a short period of time, so I appreciate the team's efforts on that.
Thank you.
Can I just check, has anybody not been able to listen to the call? I know you mentioned it already. Okay, good. Right, so observations, questions? Tim?
Just to support what Tricia said, actually, I think this is a beautiful construct call in showing what the service delivers, and has a pound sign at the end of it, which we haven't put on, but quite clearly avoids a face-to-face consultation, albeit it could have been a bit shorter and so forth.
Yeah.
But I think it's a very nice call to have to confirm what we instinctively know about the service.
Yes. Tim?
Yeah, thank you. It was a bit long. It finished really well, I thought, and the advice at the end was fantastic. If I'd had time, I didn't listen again. I mean, I'm not the one to talk about that. I mean, vomiting's pretty general. It could be a major thing. So you would expect a long call, wouldn't you? You've got to eliminate a whole raft of possibilities. So it's one of the longer decision trees, if you like, or algorithms that you've got to go through. Was the mother warned at the beginning that this was going to take a long time?
No, we don't.
And I didn't hear that. So I mean, and it might be in our introductions that we say, I've got to take you through this algorithm or a decision tree. People understand decision trees a little bit better than algorithms, I guess. But it's going to take 5 minutes, so that the person receiving the information knows it's going to take quite a long time. And I think the other thing that would do is for the call handler to actually have not a target, because that's the wrong thing, because you don't set targets for these things, but to have a notional time period that this should take. Anyway, it was just so on time that there are some subtle things that we might want to think about even at this late stage, but otherwise I thought it was excellent, good outcome.
Just two things really. I thought the nurse was extremely reassuring to what seemed quite a hesitant mother. I thought she was she had to be brought out of herself, I think, if I interpreted it right. But I thought the nice thing was that she explained the downside of this problem quite clearly, and what she must do if that happens, but also did reassure us. She said, "You're doing all the right things," and I think that was really helpful to perhaps a nervous mum.
Okay. Anything else? Kat?
I'd just like to echo the fact that I thought the nurse had a lovely manner, questioned very skillfully, and developed a good rapport, all of which were good. I wasn't that fussed actually about the length of the call. If I were to nitpick, I'd pick up on how she assessed urinary output. I wasn't quite convinced that had been explored as fully as it should have been. And also this was a 5-day illness, not a 3-day illness, which would have tended for me to be a more of a face-to-face consultation on the basis of the duration of the illness. However, the nice thing about this call was that actually the final patient outcome was assessed, and that is so often missed when we look at cases, to actually understand what ultimately did happen to this patient, and this patient didn't need any more intervention. So in this case, the nurse did everything completely appropriately.
Good, thank you. Yeah, I mean, I was pleased to hear this, and it just struck me as I was listening to it that there was real value in this service that has not been continued. And you know, that's a shame. Yeah, that's an understatement. Okay. Fine. So, do we have any other business? I haven't been advised of any. No.
Thank you.
Yes.
I've just got one thing to note, which is the contact centre planning team were awarded Professional Planning Forum accreditation last Thursday,
Fantastic.
which reflects and recognises the contribution they made to the recovery planning and the transfer of services and the work they've been doing with the finance team over the last few months. So it's a good thing for them.
Excellent. I'm pleased you raised that. We can record that formally. Excellent. Good. Okay. Well, that seemed to be a fairly short meeting. I think the danger of that is it underestimates potentially a level of work that is actually happening in the organisation. But I think it also reflects just the focus and the speed and the efficiency with which all of the issues that the organisation faces are being dealt with at the moment. So thank you very much.